I like that one, because they're all smart. That's really nice, that one.
The wedding.
Yep.
Your best man, wasn't he?
Yep, he was my best man.
He'd been promoted.
Yeah, been promoted from page boy. Yep, so he was my best man. Didn't say anything, mind, did he? He just said, I'll be your best man, but I'm not saying the speech. So the bond that me and Connor had was really good. As father and son, it was brilliant. I wanted to be a young father so that I could do these things with Connor. Climb trees, make bow and arrows.
His personality was bright. His clothes choice were bright. His attitude to life was bright.
The last conversation I had with Connor, or the last text I had off Connor, he was saying, can he come round because there was something wrong with his motorbike. And I've actually still got the text message, and he says, Dad, can I come over and can we fix my ped and everything? And I said, yeah, come over and we'll have a look at it.
Connor had gone to the caravan park for one night with his friend, and the boys were just going to go out into Porthcawl, into town, and just sort of have a nice night.
I just said, just be careful, don't drink too much.
They never thought that the day where he was just going out, walking, he was looking to, have a stroll by the beach, would end in such a tragic manner.
We actually got woken up by a knock on the door. There was 2 police stood there, and they just said, there's been an accident.
Can't even remember driving to the hospital and just thinking, what is it? What's happened? What on earth has happened? What you're faced with was just the most horrific, gruesome, unrecognisable person.
There was just blood and bruises and this red thing around his head, just keeping him still, and just a mess, a total mess.
Connor was on the bed, but we were told it was Connor, but it didn't look like Connor.
For a total stranger to just pick an innocent kid like that and just do what he done to him, it's just unbelievable. These are my favourite ones, you know that. It's always the small ones. They're the ones that really gets me because he was my blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy.
Yeah. This photo here of Connor in his big boy uniform, as he used to call it, wasn't it? So his first proper pair of shoes, not trainers. And I just remember him being really sort of feeling like ruling the school, wearing the school uniform. You asked him. He said to me, are you going to go again tomorrow?
Oh, no. I've already been. That's it. Been to school. Yeah. Oh, no, I've been once. That's it.
Yeah. We always knew that we wanted to start a family. It was always going to be on the cards. And it just happened much quicker than we both, sort of anticipated. But Rich was absolutely ecstatic. He was over the moon, as I was.
Being Connor's dad, it meant everything. It really did. It was like as if you're complete then.
Big things that stand out for me with him was his sense of humour and how caring he was. And then when I had the other children, he was really, really caring and very protective towards them. So they're sort of grinning like Cheshire cats there. They automatically stood in that order. I remember taking a photograph, and both the boys would always then fuss with Georgia, make sure that Georgia was okay, wouldn't they? Georgia's in the photograph. Yeah. But Connor was very much he would organise them, wouldn't he?
When I look back, I do feel glad I didn't work all the time. I'm glad I made time for the children. We actually had time together.
This was his 18th, wasn't it? I remember
Yes.
that clearly. And we were just really proud, weren't we? We had the party. For a man who didn't want the fuss, he made sure that the celebrations went on, didn't they?
Yes, day or two.
Yeah, just a day or two or 3 or 4. The 8th of March is my birthday. And on that particular day, it was just a normal busy day. Jack had rugby, Georgia had gymnastics, so it was one of those usual here, there and everywhere taxiing days. And Connor had come over to say that he was going on holiday. And I was really sort of, oh, right, okay. He said, I'm going on holiday, I'm going to Porthcawl. And he was really excited. Now, Porthcawl is probably 40 minutes by car from us. But to Connor, it was a real big, you know, he was going to the ends of the earth because it was something that he decided to do.
Porthcawl is sort of a seaside resort where families go to have holidays. It's a very sort of small town, sort of people go there to have a good time.
He told me that it was all planned, he was going, and they were going to go down and just spend the night with his friend in Porthcawl, and that was that. So I said, oh, all right then, and, you know, sort of joked, and I said, look, when you come back tomorrow, we'll have Sunday lunch, which was Connor's favourite. So that was sort of a foregone, yeah, we'll see you tomorrow, that was that.
Connor had gone to stay at Treacle Bay Caravan Park with 2 of his friends. It was the first sort of holiday he had been on without his parents. So while at the caravan park, he and his friends attended the on-site bar, had a few drinks.
Throughout the evening, I got texts from him updating where they were going.
They then went to Porthcawl town centre, where they went to the sports bar and were seen there until quite late in the night. The 3 of them then made their way back to Treacle Bay Caravan Park site.
I had the nightly text, which is North Star, Carry Tea, which is good night, I love you. But it didn't arrive that night, and it arrived every single night without fail. I just remember waking up at 7:22 to a big bang on the door.
Nadine went downstairs to see who it was. I looked out the bedroom window and seen there was a police car there. So I jumped out of bed, run down the stairs, and I said, oh, I'll get it. But Nadine, by then, she'd already opened the door.
There was 2 police officers, might have been 2, might have been 3, stood there. And Rich came down the stairs at the same time, and they both said, are you the parents of Connor Marshall? And obviously, yes. So we invited them in, and they were sort of like ushering us into our living room. So we went in, and they just said that they were really sorry, but there'd been an incident, and Connor was very, very poorly.
It was like as if everything was in slow motion, and it was just, you know, just thousands of thoughts going through your head. What's happened? Trying to get questions or answers off the police, and that was it. I think they were just told, just go and tell the family they've got to come into hospital, and that was it, because they knew nothing.
Connor was discovered underneath a caravan by a dog walker who just happened to stumble across him. He had serious head injuries, which had rendered him unconscious. He was taken to the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff.
We drove to the hospital. I can't remember driving there, but we pulled into the car park, and I said, well, that's the emergency exit there. I said, so we parked as close as we possibly could. I can remember running across the road, and the doors were closed, and we were banging on the door.
And then the next thing I know is that we were in like a side room, and they were in there, and I remember Richard saying, why can't we see him? Why can't we see him?
Treacle Bay Caravan Park is known for being a family-friendly place where people go to have holidays and have a good time. So this was sort of the last thing you would expect.
It was just horrible and strange to think that something's wrong with him and we couldn't see him, you know? Never in a million years did we think that it was as bad as it was. But they were trying to keep us in this room, and I walked out to the room then, and I'd seen this trolley coming towards me. And as I looked at the trolley, I was just like, oh, God, what's happened there? And as the trolley got nearer, I realised it was Connor.
All I could see was just a person, a body on the bed, and Rich was like screaming. And they went through these doors, and again, they wouldn't let us through. And just thinking, what is it? What's happened? What on earth has happened? Just being really frightened, and this feeling in the pit of your stomach of fear.
I first heard about the attack on Connor when South Wales Police issued a press release saying that Connor had been attacked, that the person who they believed to be responsible for the attack was still at large, and they were appealing for information from witnesses and for people to get in contact who might be able to help with the investigation.
The last conversation I had with Connor was literally just about enjoying himself and just staying safe. Be careful, the usual things that parents would say.
He was just like, we're going down there, we're staying in the caravan with his best mate, his sister and the baby and everything. They're gonna just go out in the night, go into the town, have a couple of drinks, and that was it.
We know now from Connor's friend, they went back to the caravan and the baby that was there was crying. And Connor didn't like the crying. And that was Connor. He was sort of sensitive. And he said to the friend, oh, I'm gonna just go out for a walk while they try and settle the baby. And that was that. That's what Connor did.
Connor was found some hours later by some people that were staying at the caravan site, lying unconscious under a caravan, covered in blood and bruises, and he was taken to hospital.
They opened the doors then, and they said, right, you can, you know, and we just walked in, and just the state of Connor, it didn't look like Connor.
And I just remember this huge wound on his eye and lots of blood and lots of doctors and sounds and beeping and police, and just being in a situation that was completely alien. I remember saying to the doctor, what about his eye? What about his eye? You need to do something, you need to do something. And the doctor very calmly just took my hand and he just said, Mum, we will sort the eye out, but that's not the priority at the moment.
And that's when things really start hitting you then. And, you know, what do you mean? Well, fix him then, you know, he's in here. And they were saying we can't get him warmed up. They can't warm him up for some reason. He was just cold.
And again, you're getting like snippets of information and you're trying to sort of work it out. And like, what do you mean he was cold?
When Connor was found, he had internal injuries. He was in a coma. He was suffering from hypothermia. He had brain swelling. He even had hemorrhages in his eyes.
They explained that Connor had been found naked and that his clothes were on a caravan next door. So again, it was just like, you know, why? And I remember asking them, you know, was it a sexual attack? Was it, you know, was that the motivation? And they didn't give us a straight answer at that time. They just said they didn't think so. It was just a random, violent, animalistic attack.
The state that Connor was in when he was found, beaten so bad that even his father said it was difficult to recognize him, naked and left alone, freezing to death, on top of all of the injuries he sustained. This is just so difficult for anyone to imagine, and it really motivated police not only to find this person immediately, but also to make sure this wasn't something that was going to be ongoing. It could happen to someone else soon.
You wouldn't necessarily know what weapons were used in order to attack Connor, so you would be keeping an open mind in respect of what you're looking for.
As they were searching the area of the caravans where Connor had been found, they discovered a metal pole underneath a caravan. When this was examined, it was found to have traces of Connor's blood on it, and perhaps the most crucial piece of evidence they found was a fingerprint.
So that would be one of the crucial lines of inquiry in that investigation, to fast-track the DNA to see if a perpetrator could be identified at the very early stages of that investigation.
I think it unfolded a lot over the 4 days we were in the hospital, but obviously we wasn't taking any notice of it.
I remember the nurse saying, he was in a coma, but that he may be able to hear. So it's really important that you keep talking to him, and that's what we did.
Hour by hour, some of the swelling had gone down, some of the bruising had gone down. So to us, he looked like he was getting better.
We were in a side room at one point, and a nurse, 2 nurses came in, sat and introduced herself, and she said that she was the organ donor coordinating nurse or something.
When they first came in the room and they said, "We're from organ donation," the first thought that went through my head was they were going to give Connor organs. They were going to give Connor something. But then as soon as they said that Connor was on the organ donation, about using his organs, that was when it was like, what?
And it was disbelief. We weren't prepared to even try to understand, because to agree to organ donation was to agree to stop any medical intervention. And then they told us about the actual process that was happening in Connor's neck or head, and that was why he was swelling, was because of the brain injury was so significant that the actual brain was being pushed down the spinal column or down the spinal cord, and that once that happens, that it's irreversible.
Said everything. I said to him, look, if they said that he had a ruptured something, and well, take mine off me then. I said, I'm older. I said, I've had my life. I said, you need something to make him better, take it. If I gotta go, I gotta go. And that's it. Connor was 18 years old, so.
The doctors were very clear that every intervention had been used, was being used, but that brain scans and all the evidence was showing that there was no, and I remember the words, sustainable life possible.
It was quite shocking that a young man of 18 years old had gone out just to have a good time with his friends and ended up in a critical condition in hospital. I felt absolutely terrible for his parents and his family for what they were going through, and obviously trying to find out what had happened in the early stages.
And the police couldn't tell us anything. They were just saying, it's an incident, we're looking into it. And it just snowballed from there then.
I described Connor. He was handsome, he was good looking, he was very polite. I mean, he'd literally stop and open the door for somebody and things like that, which You do, you look back and you smile about it because you think, oh, that's when older people, and they go, oh, thank you very much. And you just think, oh, I brought him up well.
As a police officer, when you are dealing with an investigation that at that particular time is an attempted murder, you hope with all your heart that this young man, 18 years of age, in his prime, you hope that he will survive. And then you deal with members of the family who also would be completely traumatised.
I remember climbing up on the bed with him and just snuggling in and cutching with him, but he wasn't able to do that. It was like Rich had to put his arm around me, Connor's arm around me, and the kids did the same, and it was brutal.
As a dad, I'd let him down because I wasn't there to protect him. Seeing him in that state, just that. I should have been there. I know I couldn't have been there, but everybody says, oh yeah, but you couldn't have done anything, but that's not the point. He's my son and I'm there. I'm supposed to protect him.
And Connor was asleep. It was very peaceful. It was harrowing. It was just the hardest thing to do.
It became apparent that he had suffered brain swelling as a result of the head injuries he had sustained. And as a result of that, he died.
And I remember being in the hospital and then having spent 4 days there and then finally leaving, the four of us leaving after we'd had to say goodbye to Connor. I don't even know how Richard did it, but he drove us all home. We got home and we just all went into the living room and we just crashed, all of us.
You're dealing with the family, you're dealing with the investigation that is unfolding in front of you, and there were a whole host of questions that were asked. The family wanting to know who did this, why did this happen, what part did their son actually play in this attack on him? Was he involved in an altercation? They would have a whole number of questions that were rambling through their minds because they want to know what's happened.
I can remember the detective coming in, I don't know at what point, and telling us that the investigation was really ramping up and that they had an idea of a suspect who they wanted to speak to.
In the early stages of the investigation, we were told that police wanted to speak to a man who had driven from the caravan site, had got on a train at Caerphilly train station, had then gone to Cardiff Central railway station before making their way to the north of England.
That was when they told us that this person that they were pretty sure was involved was the person that had hurt Connor, had disappeared, he'd gone to ground. And it was just this name that came up, this David Braddon, and I'd never heard of it. And it was, that name then that is rotting inside you then.
So police first stumbled across the name David Braddon after finding a fingerprint on the metal pole that was found at the scene of Connor's murder. Braddon was previously known to police and his details were in the police system, so when they put that fingerprint through the system, they then discovered that it was Braddon.
As soon as David Braddon was identified as being involved in the attack on Connor, police officers would have taken a series of actions. So, first of all, they would have circulated him as wanted, but also They would take steps to locate him via his mobile phone, and it was a mobile phone that actually located David Braddon.
And they told us of the operation that he'd gone to Scotland, and basically they knew who he was and they knew where he was.
He was found hiding behind a sofa at a relative's house, and when the officers made the initial arrest, he said something along the lines of, "Am I being arrested for suspicion of murder, and is the boy dead?"
When they first were interrogating him, he wouldn't say anything. And this is not uncommon for the first round of interviews that police experience.
And the likelihood is he made no comment because he probably felt at that time that he had a good chance of not being convicted of the murder.
In 4 days, we'd been left with nothing, a whole massive crater in our lives, and not very much to fill it with, because David Braddon, being the coward that he was, refused to help and was not giving any reasons or answers as to why he did it. It's just a big mess and a huge, as I said, a huge crater that's just completely obliterated my heart, my family, my life, anything that I know.
That being said, police also knew they had a lot of forensic evidence and other types of evidence that ultimately they felt pretty confident would secure a conviction if they had to go to trial.
The caravan site did have CCTV around the area. It showed Connor there, a young 18-year-old, vibrant young man enjoying his evening with his friends. Amazingly and coincidentally, both Braddon and Connor were in the same environment, in the same bar. Connor was sat there literally feet away, enjoying his evening, not knowing that that was going to be the last night he would ever spend with his friends.
Having made their way back to Treacle Bay Caravan Park, Connor split up from his friends at around 1 a.m. He wanted to go and walk along the coastline. He was then seen later that evening around 2 to 2:30 in the morning. Perhaps it was the last footage in which Connor was conscious and alive.
When Braddon was initially interviewed by police officers, he made no comment, but he changed his mind, and then he did begin to answer questions when the evidence started to unfold in front of him.
The metal pole that was found nearby, the clothes that were discarded from Connor, and obviously the forensic information on that pole, including Braddon's fingerprint.
He would have to give an account to the police officers as to why his blood was found on the weapon that was used to assault Connor Marshall.
And then they were also telling us the reasons why Braddon was there he was there allegedly to rekindle his relationship with the mother of his children. And that was why they were in the camp.
It was while at the caravan park that he discovered that his girlfriend had been sending messages to her ex-boyfriend, who was coincidentally also staying at the caravan park. This sent him into a rage.
You mentioned drugs. Tell us about the drugs, what's going on?
Braddon had taken a cocktail of alcohol and drugs. He'd taken cocaine and 50 Valium tablets. I mean, that is a ridiculous amount. And what can happen in some people who are prone to violence, who are, naturally quite impulsive and aggressive, it can disinhibit them.
David Braddon was an individual that had serious issues around jealousy. Couldn't control his own temper, couldn't control his own behaviours, was jealous of the fact that there'd been an exchange of text messages between his estranged partner and her ex-partner.
And so then Braddon decides that he's going to take matters into his own hand, and he grabbed a kitchen knife and he went out onto the caravan park looking for this man. He's in this state where he's looking for a fight. So It's not surprising that when he sees Connor, he almost convinces himself that this is the man, this is the target.
He was walking ahead of me. First time ever called. He just turned around. There was like no one else about. It was darkness. Yeah. Started saying, started arguing, swearing and that. He started swearing back, so just assumed it was him, and we started fighting. I just got out of control.
He said that they'd gotten into an altercation and that Connor threw the first punch. So by this point, he's building up a picture to suggest that Connor was actually the person that was a perpetrator and that an altercation had taken place.
Connor wasn't a fighter. He was literally, he used to think he was tough, but he wasn't. He was a big teddy bear. He would shy away from a fight straight away.
Young Connor was attacked so ferociously. He was knocked to the ground. He was beaten about the face, about the chest, about the head.
How many times have you hit him in the head? 5, 4, 5. I wanted to humiliate him. So I stripped his clothes, chucked his clothes on top of the caravans.
The fact that Connor was defenseless, was so badly injured, but he took it upon himself to strip this young man naked and throw his clothing to one side is an indication of the type of individual that he is. The level of violence that he inflicted shows a level of depth of anger, the red mist and the violence that was within this individual, and I don't think that anybody could have predicted that.
Got my phone up, checked his face, and that over.
It was then that he claimed he shone the torch in Connor's face and realised it was not the person he'd intended to attack, and then fled the scene in fear for the consequences.
Started speaking. I thought he'd get up. I panicked and went. I didn't mean to kill him.
Braddon's main defense was basically mistaken identity, that he brutally murdered the wrong person. But when you think about this, that is equally horrific. This other man had done nothing to him as well, and yet he was supposedly going to be brutally murdered because he had been exchanging text messages with Braddon's girlfriend, and there's no justification.
Knowing what we knew then from the police, that it was an unprovoked attack for no reason, it's just mind-blowing how you can comprehend and understand it. Somehow or another, in all of the chaos, we managed to to arrange a funeral that was just lovely in all its horrible reasoning for being there.
We went into a local florist not far from us, and she got this book from under the counter, opened the book, and there was a coffin with all flowers on top of it. And I walked out at that stage and said, "No, the brown coffin, horrible brown coffin, brass handles." And I said, "He's 18 years old, I'm not, no, that's not right."
Richard was absolutely amazing. He got this beautiful coffin full of pictures of Connor because Connor was the star of the show. It was all about Connor, and we wanted Connor to be the centre of that as he was to us.
When you go to a funeral, the coffin comes down and you stood there and you look at the coffin and then you look away because it's a coffin. Whereas this was Connor's. And when people looked at that coffin, they took another look at the coffin because it was different. It was pictures of Connor all over the coffin.
The months after Connor's death was, again, just surreal. We just put one foot in front of the other. It was our new normal that we had to do, and we just sort of waded through it.
Given all of the evidence that police had suggesting that Braddon was in fact the killer, it was infuriating for the family, for the community, and for law enforcement that he refused to admit what he had done.
And then when we got to the trial hearing, there was lots of people there. There was lots of our family, lots of his family. His children were there. It was just horrific. And when he finally came up from under the court, he walked up the steps. He didn't look at us. And he sat in front of us, and I could see the tattoos on his neck and on his hands.
When I seen him, I could have truly killed him myself. Because he'd ruined my life. And he really did.
I was just shaking, completely shaking, couldn't stop shaking and feeling as if I was going to be sick.
David Braddon, he's a coward. That's why he didn't go to trial. He left it long enough to, and at the last minute then, he pleaded guilty.
Ultimately, he ended up changing his plea to guilty, but this seemed very self-serving. It was just to get a reduced sentence, which only further infuriated the family.
At the end of the plea hearing, he was basically awarded a 25-year tariff, but because he pleaded guilty early, in their opinion, he was rewarded with 5 years taken off his sentence.
They told us life means life. How can life mean 20 years in prison? That's not life. Me and my wife are going through a life sentence. That animal will be out one day walking the streets.
And the judge did his summing up and then said what he said. And then he turned round and basically said to take him away. And as he turned round, he looked directly at us. We were sat up in the balcony, and he looked up at us and gave us a thumbs up. And that was just absolutely crushing, that there was such disrespect and no remorse. He wasn't remorseful. He was taunting us.
He may have pled guilty to the crime. However, the fact is, he hasn't shown any remorse, and I think that's the last disgraceful, despicable act of a coward.
I know I struggle really hard with, and I've said it to you loads of times, haven't I, that I struggle with trying to remember Connor's voice. And I so desperately don't want to forget. And I find that really difficult, that if I'm honest with myself, I think, no, I can't remember it. But I've really got to struggle and push and try, and that's the only words I can ever remember him is just, "Ma'am." And then that makes me angry that somebody took that away from me.
The longer it goes on, the more you miss him. And he's not going to come back through the door. You just, whether it's pray, whether it's wish, and just that it was all a big mistake.
And then in August, a letter came to us as parents of Connor Marshall, and it was just a general letter saying, "Hello, hi, my name is such and such. I'm the probation liaison officer appointed by the service because you may or may not know that David Braddon was already being managed by the probation service." And I said, so they're saying that they knew who David Braddon was? I don't get that.
So that was it. It just turned the world upside down again. It was just like, why weren't we told any of this? Why wasn't all this brought up before he went to trial?
At the time of the attack, Braddon was already under supervision for drug offences, for attacking a police officer, plus he had this previous conviction of battery in 2009. So there's a pattern here. We're seeing the picture of a man who is callous, he's impulsive, he's aggressive, he's violent.
And then, so eventually it became clear that David Braddon should have been monitored and that he had conditions. And those conditions were that he had, a curfew, or he wasn't allowed to go different places.
Even now, I think I was on the understanding that if you're on licence, you're being watched. You're being managed. Obviously, that's not the case, is it? Because if he can go out and he can go into the family area and do what he's done, then obviously they're not watching him.
This was something that shocked Connor's parents, and then they campaigned to make sure there was an inquest into Connor's death to look into the failures of what happened.
In this particular case, the purpose of the coroner's inquest was to see if the probation services were fit for purpose. Were they doing their job?
During the inquest into Connor's death, we learned that Braddon had missed a total of 8 appointments with probation, which would have put him in breach of that licence, and perhaps if things had been monitored more carefully, there would have been a different outcome.
Thankfully, we got the best results that we could have got, which was that it was agreed that yes, there were systemic failings, there was complete and utter management disarray and oversight.
The coroner did not find a direct link between the problems with the probation services and Connor's death, but nevertheless, they highlighted some big areas that needed improvement.
And that is a voice for Connor, that we demanded that there be more transparency and more accountability, but it's not there yet. Connor had the tattoo on his arm, "Life Goes On," which had caused a massive row when he'd had it, because he went and had it without me knowing, and he had this pointless thing written on his thing, and I was like, why, But he just kind of quite simply said at the time, "Because it does, Mum. Life does go on."
Connor and Jack, they used to love coming in here, we'd pick them up from school. Oh, could we just go down the beach? It's a half hour.
Yeah.
Just so they could skim stones and throw stones.
And it was Mum sort of that suggested, wasn't it? Let's have, what about a bench? One of the many reasons why I wanted the bench to be here was because I used to come here with my mum and dad and even my nan and grampy. I just remember the nice things here because Connor loved it. Connor loved it here so much.
This was our happy place, wasn't it? We used to bring them here, and this is where they used to have fun all the time,
The inscription on the bench, it just says it all, really, doesn't it? It's enough.
We had to have his name, obviously, Connor Jake Marshall, but our number one son, our number one, because he was our number one, wasn't he? He was our number one son, he was our firstborn.
And then he's missed every day, and then life goes on, which is that motto that, as a family, we all literally stick to it, don't we? And
that's his mantra, isn't it? Life goes on, And that's, in a way, is one of those things that, when we do feel down and we feel then life goes on.